Have you noticed your shipments from China or Hong Kong are suddenly more expensive? Maybe you're seeing new charges, unexpected delays, or confusing paperwork at customs. If that sounds familiar, you're likely dealing with something called IEEPA-related tariffs. And trust us, this isn't a minor policy tweak. It's part of a broader U.S. trade enforcement strategy that's actively reshaping how certain goods are handled at the border. We know trade rules can feel overwhelming, but don't worry. In this video, we'll break it all down in simple, clear terms. We'll walk through what IEEPA is, why it matters, which products are affected, and how you can protect your business from surprises. Whether you're a business owner, supply chain manager, or just someone curious about international trade, this video is for you. And if you appreciate content that helps you stay informed and one step ahead, support our channel by hitting that like button and subscribing. It really helps us keep creating quality content for the trade community. What is IEEPA and why it matters? The International Emergency Economic Powers Act, better known as IEEPA, is one of the most powerful tools in the U.S. government's trade and foreign policy toolkit. Enacted in 1977, this law gives the president sweeping authority to regulate international commerce during times of national emergency. That includes the ability to freeze assets, block transactions, and, more relevant to today's topic, impose additional duties and restrictions on imports and exports. IEEPA is typically used in response to serious threats, whether that's foreign aggression, terrorism, cyber attacks, or unfair trade practices. And in recent years, it's become a central part of how the U.S. deals with China. Right now, the U.S. government is using IEEPA as part of a broader economic pressure campaign targeting China and Hong Kong. This isn't just about tariffs, it's about addressing concerns over national security, unfair trade practices, forced technology transfers, and geopolitical influence. IEEPA gives Washington the legal framework to act fast when diplomacy alone isn't enough. The result? Importers are seeing new and unexpected duties, especially on products with Chinese or Hong Kong origin, even if those products were previously duty-free or low tariff. And because IEEPA operates under emergency powers, it often bypasses traditional legislative checks, making the impact immediate and wide-reaching. These aren't your standard trade adjustments. They're targeted, strategic, and often aimed at very specific product categories or industries. Understanding IEEPA isn't just helpful, it's now essential if you're importing from East Asia. What products are affected now, you might be wondering? Does IEEPA apply to everything coming in from China or Hong Kong? The answer is no, not everything, but a very large and growing list of products is affected. The key lies in how those products are classified under the Harmonized Tariff Schedule of the United States, or HTSUS for short. In particular, Chapter 99 of the HTSUS plays a major role here. This chapter is where the U.S. government places special tariff programs, including Section 301 duties, Section 232 tariffs, and now, IEEPA-related actions. If your product is flagged under certain 99 prefix tariff codes, there's a strong chance it's subject to extra ad valorem duties, sometimes as high as 25% on top of normal tariffs. Let's look at what kinds of goods are commonly affected. 1. Consumer electronics like phones, tablets, and accessories. 2. Industrial parts and machinery used in manufacturing. 3. Textiles and apparel, including clothing and footwear. 4. Automotive components, electrical circuits, and metals. 5. Even everyday items like kitchenware, furniture, and toys can fall under these categories. What makes this more challenging is that the additional tariffs often apply based on origin, not just the item itself. So even if your product looks like it should be exempt, if it was manufactured, assembled, or significantly transformed in China or Hong Kong, it could trigger the added duties. And these tariffs don't replace the ones already on the books. They stack on top of existing customs duties, anti-dumping fees, or other trade penalties. That means if your product already had a 5% tariff, and it's now hit with a 25% IEEPA-related duty, you're looking at 30% total in customs costs, possibly more when you add brokerage, documentation, and compliance expenses. This can seriously impact pricing, margins, and even your ability to stay competitive, especially for businesses importing at scale. If you're unsure whether your products are affected, checking your HTS code against Chapter 99 listings is a smart first step. We'll talk more about that in a later section. Expanded. Formal versus informal entry. What's the difference? Here's where things get especially tricky, and often overlooked, for importers. The distinction between formal and informal entry might seem like a technicality, but under IEEPA enforcement, it makes a big difference. Under normal circumstances, the US allows many low-value shipments, especially those under $800, thanks to the de minimis rule, to enter the country via informal entry. This process is faster, cheaper, and involves less documentation. It's great for e-commerce, small businesses, and low-volume importers. But when a product falls under the IEEPA-related restrictions, particularly those outlined in Chapter 99 of the HTS-US, that convenience goes out the window. The rules now require a formal entry, even if the shipment is valued at just $250 or more, far below the usual de minimis threshold. Let's be clear, this means that even small orders of targeted goods, like a handful of electronics parts or clothing samples, must go through the full formal customs clearance process. That includes 1. Filing a formal CBP entry with detailed commercial invoices. 2. Paying a processing fee. 3. Using a customs broker, in most cases. 4. Submitting detailed product classification and origin information, and it's not just about jumping through hoops. Formal entry involves more scrutiny, longer processing times, and higher costs, both in terms of money and labor. For importers who've been relying on informal entries to keep things lean and simple, this shift can be a shock to the system. It's not uncommon to see delays, penalties, or shipments flagged for review simply because the importer didn't realize that their product now required a different entry type. Even seasoned logistics professionals have been caught off guard by how quickly these rules went into effect, and how aggressively they're being enforced by CBP. Bottom line? If you're importing any item that might be subject to IEEPA duties, assume formal entry is the new default, and plan accordingly. Are there any exceptions? So, with all these added restrictions and duties, are there any exceptions? Yes, but they're quite specific and narrowly defined. One major carve-out exists under HTS-US subheading the 22nd of January 9903. This provision exempts certain goods from IEEPA-related tariffs, but only if they qualify as informational materials. What does that include? We're talking about things like 1. Books and printed publications. 2. Magazines and periodicals. 3. Films, photographs, and microfilms. 4. Artworks and academic research documents. 5. Maps, musical recordings, and similar media. These items are exempt because they fall under protections for freedom of expression and information exchange. In fact, this exemption is rooted in U.S. constitutional principles and international norms, including First Amendment rights and commitments under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So if you're importing educational content, media for journalism, or creative works intended for public consumption, you're likely in the clear. Let's take a practical example. A university bringing in historical film reels from a Hong Kong archive, likely exempt. A bookstore importing Chinese language literature for a cultural event, also likely exempt. A manufacturer importing circuit boards that happen to contain embedded software, not exempt. Those would still face the full tariff load under IEEPA and Chapter 99. However, here's the catch. You must still classify these items correctly and provide supporting documentation. CBP doesn't take your word for it. Your customs paperwork must clearly describe the product and cite the correct HTS code to trigger the exemption. Failing to do so could result in unnecessary duties, entry rejection, or worse, audit flags down the line. If there's any ambiguity about whether your goods qualify as informational materials, it's worth consulting a licensed customs broker or trade attorney. The line between informational and commercial can sometimes be blurry, and CBP will always err on the side of enforcement if it's unclear. So while exceptions do exist, they're narrow, and you need to know exactly how and when to use them. What this means for importers: if you're sourcing goods from China or Hong Kong, this isn't something you can afford to ignore. IEEPA enforcement isn't a suggestion, it's mandatory, and CBP is taking it seriously. Customs and Border Protection has already started ramping up audits, targeting importers who misclassify goods or overlook Chapter 99 tariff flags. If your product is subject to IEEPA-related duties and you fail to report it properly, you could face hefty penalties, shipment holds, or even seizures at the port. This has become especially important for businesses that rely on just-in-time inventory or have tight shipping windows. Even a short delay due to customs rejections or document errors can disrupt your entire supply chain, leading to missed sales, higher air freight costs, or strained client relationships. And here's the tough part. IEEPA duties apply based on origin, not necessarily branding. So if you're importing a US branded product that was assembled or produced in China, it can still be hit with these extra duties. That's why it's absolutely essential to 1. Work closely with your customs broker. 2. Review every product's HTS code and country of origin. 3. Double-check whether Chapter 99 applies. 4. And prepare for increased landed costs in your pricing model. Many businesses are now re-evaluating their sourcing strategies altogether. Some are shifting production to Vietnam, Mexico, or India to avoid these tariffs, while others are negotiating new terms with suppliers or passing costs onto consumers. Either way, IEEPA is not a temporary blip. It's part of a much larger shift in how the US manages economic pressure through trade policy. So for importers, adapting isn't optional, it's a matter of survival and competitiveness. What you can do now. So with all this in mind, what can you actually do right now to stay compliant, avoid delays, and protect your bottom line? Step 1 is to check your product's HTS code, and do it thoroughly. The harmonized tariff schedule is the foundation of all customs classifications. Every product has a 10-digit code, and that number determines whether your item is subject to IEEPA-related duties. What you're looking for are flags under Chapter 99, which signal that your goods fall under special tariff actions, including those authorized by IEEPA. You can use CBP's ACE portal, or the USIDC's HTS search tool, to review the current tariff language and duty rates for your code. Be sure to check the general notes and footnotes, too. That's where a lot of the IEEPA-related rules are referenced. Step 2. Avoid assuming informal entry is acceptable. Even if your shipment is low in value, if it contains goods flagged under IEEPA-related rules, you must use formal entry. That means preparing the right paperwork and filing through a broker, not just relying on standard courier processes. Step 3. If there's any uncertainty, speak with a licensed customs broker or trade attorney. IEEPA enforcement is complex, and guessing wrong could cost you a lot more than the consultation fee. A broker can help you. 1. Properly classify your goods. 2. Determine the correct country of origin. 3. Identify potential exemptions. 4. Avoid CBP scrutiny or post-entry audits. Step 4. Keep up with CBP updates and Federal Register notices. The rules around IEEPA are subject to change, sometimes with very little warning. A new directive or clarification could affect your supply chain overnight. Consider setting up alerts for keywords like IEEPA, Chapter 99, or China duties on official Gov sites to stay ahead of the curve. And lastly, it's wise to build flexibility into your sourcing and pricing strategies. As the global trade landscape continues to shift, being agile and staying informed is your best defense. Keep watching and stay informed. IEEPA-related tariffs can feel overwhelming at first glance, we get it. There are sudden rule changes, complex classifications, and a lot of technical jargon. But here's the good news: a little bit of knowledge goes a long way. By understanding how these rules work and staying alert to changes, you can avoid costly mistakes, improve compliance, and even uncover opportunities others are missing. The world of international trade is evolving fast, and policies like IEEPA are just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Whether it's tariffs, new customs regulations, or global supply chain shifts, we'll be here to break it all down, one update at a time. So if this video helped you make sense of things, or saved you a few hours of research, go ahead and support the channel. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And we'd love to hear from you in the comments. Have you run into IEEPA-related issues in your shipments? How are you adjusting to the new requirements? We're building a growing community of importers, exporters, and curious viewers who care about the future of global trade, and your voice matters. As always, we've listed official sources and helpful links in the video description if you want to explore further or double-check anything we covered today. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.